Hey tankers, this is episode 7 of my Road to Unicum series. We're having a second look at the ELC, this time in a tier 8 battle. Obviously against high tier tanks, the ELC is at risk of getting one shot, and you have to play with that in mind, as compared to a tier 6 battle where you can be a lot more aggressive. In our initial deployment, I decided to go hill, and the reason is this. In most light and medium tanks, I would go down to E5 and E6 and spot from mid and shoot tanks at mid, and then also have the positional ability to provide flanking fire on tanks spotted on hill. However, with the ELC, going middle can be a real issue for a few reasons. One, the tank is a terrible hill or crest fighter because it has a very poor max gun depression of -5 degrees, coupled with the fact that the gun is rear mounted, and on top of that, as we discussed in the last video, the gun handling is atrocious. So if I go mid, I can spot tanks at mid, but realistically I won't be able to take shots at them, and the only tanks I can shoot at will be tanks on the hill. However, if I come to the hill, I can spot tanks on the hill, tanks below the hill, shoot on both locations, and provide flanking fire for tanks spotted at mid. So thanks to the ELC's fantastic mobility, I'm able to get all the way up to the top of the hill here, and I spot a Tiger P which has entered the cap circle, and since I'm lit, I decide to just pull back toward the red line and leverage these crests to provide hard cover for the ELC, which has such a low profile. It's very easy to quickly get out of line of sight, and then I come back to keeping the Tiger P lit. Now a Panther starts to move its way up here, and I position myself so this little bush is between the two of us, and because the bush, when you look at it, doesn't look transparent, it means that it's beyond 15 meters from me, so that even after I fire, I'm still getting the camouflage benefits from that soft cover. We burn down the Panther, and then trying to see if I have a shot on the Tiger P. It turns out I do. He just backed out a little bit, and I need to aim my gun just a little bit lower. But as I do so, I get proximity spotted by a Cromwell, and here I make the first of two major tomato mistakes. So instead of driving back far enough to make sure that I drop from being lit by the Cromwell, I stay here and force a shot on the Tiger P. I kill him, but I lose over 90% of my hit points in the process, and this was just utterly foolish because the Tiger P was no threat to anyone. He wasn't going to build up cap points, and he had his gun buried next to the side of a building and wasn't shooting anybody. So I essentially risked 90% of my HP for very little gain and really deserved to die. So I do want to keep spotting, and I crawl up to a bush here along the red line and spot a Tiger. And what's nice about our deployment of tanks on this side of the map is we're pretty spread out, so we have different angles of fire. We're able to chew off a lot of that Tiger's hit points, and the thing though is that because I've lost 90% of my hit points, I have very little tactical flexibility in terms of when and how I can spot. Now if I were still at full HP and had been more careful, I would be driving up to that tree in front of me and those bushes and trying to spot not only the Tiger but also the Cromwell, which may still be up here. But because anything that hits me and penetrates will kill me, I'm very easily one-shottable. I can even, if something even taps my bumper, I'm going to implode. So I'm having to be very conservative here as a result of my earlier reckless mistake, and our ISU charges forward and proximity spots the Cromwell and wrecks him. However, the ISU is totally exposed on the top of the hill, which is a real issue for coming up here, and just gets absolutely wrecked. He loses all of his hit points. He does spot a Roomba and a T-34, and you'll notice I made a mistake right there. I drove over some destructible stuff on the ground. It was like ammo. So even if tanks can't physically see me, I've given away my location, and if they were pre-aiming, it would make it easier for them to hit me right now once I'm lit. So we're taking some fire here. KV-85 on our team unwisely went to the edge of the hill. Not sure what these people were thinking. They probably had a tomato moment like I did earlier, and as a result, the two tanks who came with me up here are both dead. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the great thing about being on hill is you can provide flanking fire for tanks down at the middle of the map, and I bounce a shot off of the side turret of the T-34. And I have to be really careful because they still got, all three of their arties, and they also have a Roomba down by the train tracks, and that tank has a pretty potent gun. Right, the T-34, like a lot of heavies below Tier 9, doesn't have particularly good vision control. So I go ahead and work my way up here, and you can see the soft cover again is very solid, which means that even after I fire, I retain the benefits of that soft cover from a camo perspective, and the T-34 is pretty blind relative to me, so even after hitting him, I don't get lit. Thinking about that earlier big mistake that I made, very often in battles you'll see light tank drivers make poor decisions and die as a result. And they're not available the rest of the match to help spot targets or to provide some additional damage per minute. And I think in general that really can affect the outcome of a match. Like if you look at the score now, we have been leading throughout for a while now. But if you go back later in this video, if you were to replay the sequence of events, we probably would have lost the eastern side of the map. And as you'll see in a few minutes, my actions result in all three of the arties getting killed, right, in terms of spotting or damaging them. So, if I had died earlier, we would have lost the eastern side of the map, and what ends up being a fairly close finish probably would have been a loss. So I spot the arty here. You'll notice as soon as I stopped and waited a couple seconds for the binoculars to kick in, then I was able to spot his tank, and I should be aiming just a tad to the left a little bit. There's a little knob on the top of his tank. But regardless, this is a pretty tough shot to make, and I'm just keeping him lit so that our arties can kill him. And then inexplicably our T-29 drives over the ridge. He kills the arty, but he's now left himself vulnerable to both the Roomba, who sets him on fire, as well as the M12 arty, who's still kind of at the end of the train tracks here. So you can see the entire eastern side of the map is gone, as far as non-arty tanks, except for me. And so, if I had died earlier due to my tomato moment, I think we probably would have lost this battle. Okay, I know where the M12 is. He's right on the other side of these train tracks, and unfortunately one of our arties fires before I even get into position to proximity spot him, so that was a bit of a waste of a shot. Actually, you'll see that throughout this battle. I don't know why, but one or more of our arties was taking a lot of blind shots, which makes no sense given their reload times. And so I'm just waiting for them to fire on the M12, and eventually one of them does, but the shot is pretty far off. He way overshoots the M12 instead of shooting in front of him. And the M12 driver, obviously he knows he can't just sit here, and let me proximity spot him. So he goes ahead and drives off. And, I think to myself, if I were in that driver's shoes, what would I do? I would probably drive north along the train tracks because he can't head west. There's too much open ground. But, as long as he's still near the train tracks, there's some bushes and a little depression that can protect him. So I simply mirror what I would do in this situation if I were him. Drive forward along the train tracks, and then proximity spot him again. Now, I'm also a bit lucky in that, the Roomba never came over the tracks and took a shot on me. He may not realize that the eastern side of the map is pretty empty, so, if he pushed on me, I would have been easy fodder for him. And then I have two options to try to go spot him. One is I can cross over the tracks here, which I decide not to do, but I could have crossed over and then run the 6th line and, use my speed to try to spot him and also drive around without getting shot. Now I make another tomato mistake here. Instead of just staying up along the top of the railroad tracks and then driving back down, staying on the eastern side once I had him spotted, I, for whatever reason, drove over the tracks, and because of my speed, I went down, tracked myself right in front of the Roomba, and that's that. And, continuing to watch this actually made for some anxious moments because we only have 2 tanks left in the field that can spot for our arties. So we've got the IS-6 who's pretty beat up, as well as this Fury, and the Fury is driving across open ground, and compared to the Roomba, he has really poor vision control. So he gets nailed, but is unable to spot the Roomba when he dies. The IS-6 can't see anything yet because he's still in a depression, which is the right thing to do. He's coming up carefully to try to spot for arties. And we have some of our arties continuing to blind fire. So, again, if you go back to that earlier first big mistake that I made when I got greedy and forced a shot on the Tiger P, if I had died then, the whole sequence of events that led to us wiping them off the eastern side of the map and killing their arties wouldn't have played out that way, and in my opinion, we probably would have lost the battle. So the Roomba rushes a shot and thankfully misses, and the IS-6 puts him down, so we're able to pull this off. I get an Ace Tanker Mastery badge out of this, despite my sloppy play, probably on the weight of the 1300 damage I did as well as the 2800 spotting damage. In episode 8, we're going to take a look at the Tier 9 T-54 Soviet medium tank in a battle against a Unicum platoon with G, PBCAC, and Bulls. Take care.